Ethan Marcus Sinclair's muscles tightened as the wheels of the military transport plane touched down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The low rumble of the aircraft was the only sound as it taxied toward the runway. But Ethan's mind was already far from the sterile atmosphere of the plane. He was focused on the homecoming, on the moment he'd finally reunite with his family after a grueling 9-month deployment in Afghanistan. His fingers drummed the edge of his seat in anticipation, the thrill of seeing Lily and Caleb again taking the edge off the exhaustion that still clung to his bones. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips as he thought of their faces when they saw him, the shock and joy that would light up the room. But as the plane came to a stop, Ethan's phone buzzed in his hand. He quickly checked the screen, expecting a flood of messages from Lily or even Caleb, but it was empty. No texts, no calls. Just an email from his commanding officer about debriefing. He frowned, his brow furrowing. Maybe the connectivity's been spotty on base, he thought. It's probably nothing. The taxi ride from Fort Bragg to his suburban neighborhood was quiet, the road stretching out before him in the late afternoon light. Ethan's gaze wandered out the window, taking in the landscape that had been his world for years. The same winding streets, the same houses with their manicured lawns. Yet, as he stared at the familiar sights, there was something off about it, subtle but unmistakable. The small park where Caleb used to play seemed a little more weathered, the swings rusting slightly. The neighborhood seemed quieter than usual, almost too still. Ethan instinctively shifted in his seat, his military training coming to the forefront. Something wasn't right. He glanced at the taxi driver, a man who looked as though he had been in the area for years, his expression distant. "You get many changes around here recently?" Ethan asked casually. The driver gave a half-hearted shrug. "Oh, you know how it is. Kids grow up, stuff changes. Not much to talk about, really?" Ethan nodded, though his instincts told him to dig deeper. The tranquility felt like an illusion, a thin veil that might be hiding something. As the taxi pulled up in front of his colonial-style house, Ethan's heart leapt. There it was, the home he had left behind, a place filled with memories, laughter, and warmth. But as he stepped out and surveyed the property, his smile faded. Something was different. Lily's cherished rose garden, the one she had spent countless hours tending to, was gone. In its place were rows of generic shrubs, neat, yes, but completely impersonal. The house, which once exuded warmth and character, now seemed strangely sterile. The front door, usually adorned with a small wreath from Lily, stood bare. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. What the hell happened? He walked toward the front porch, his steps slower, more deliberate. Something in his gut told him to be cautious, to watch for signs that didn't fit. As he passed by the mailbox, he noticed the absence of familiar touches. No children's drawings on the fridge, no photographs on the walls. The house felt empty. His elderly neighbor, Evelyn Thompson, stepped out of her front door just as Ethan approached. The old woman's eyes met his, and she froze for a moment. Her face, usually warm with a knowing smile, now twisted with something that resembled pity. "Oh, Ethan," she said softly, stepping back as if to give him space. "I didn't know you'd be back so soon." Ethan gave her a confused smile. "A little earlier than planned, I guess." He took a step closer, but Evelyn's reaction seemed off. Her eyes darted away, and she quickly muttered, "Good to see you, Ethan," before retreating inside, leaving Ethan standing on the sidewalk, a chill creeping down his spine. Something's wrong, Ethan thought as he approached the front door. His tactical instincts flared to life, and he paused before turning the knob. He didn't know why, but he felt as if he were walking into a situation that wasn't what it seemed. His eyes narrowed, scanning the windows and the perimeter of the house, but everything appeared normal. Still, that nagging feeling persisted. He opened the door. The air inside felt wrong. The familiar scent of Lily's cooking, the aroma of fresh coffee, none of it was there. It was almost like a stranger's house. Clean, sterile, but devoid of life. He could hear the faint sound of footsteps above, and for a brief moment, relief flooded him. Caleb was home. Ethan? A voice echoed from the staircase, and Caleb appeared, bounding down the steps in a blur of motion. The boy, now 8 years old, crashed into his father's arms, squeezing him tightly. Ethan's heart swelled as he held his son close, the boy's small body shaking with emotion. But something was off. Caleb's grip was tight, but his shoulders were tense. When Ethan pulled back to look at him, the boy's eyes were wide, too wide, filled with an emotion Ethan couldn't quite place. "Everything okay, buddy?" Ethan asked, his voice soft but filled with concern. Caleb hesitated for a moment, then whispered, Mom's getting married. To Uncle Ryan." The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. Ryan, his brother? Ethan's mind raced, trying to process the revelation. Lily and Ryan? His brother, his flesh and blood? He couldn't believe it. "Wait. What?" Ethan asked, his voice unsteady. "To Uncle Ryan? Are you sure about this?" Caleb nodded slowly, his eyes flicking nervously to the side, as if hoping Ethan wouldn't push further. The blood drained from Ethan's face. His senses heightened, his heart pounding in his chest as betrayal began to settle in. This wasn't just a surprise homecoming. It was a brutal shock that shattered everything he thought he knew about his life. The man who had fought for his country, who had sacrificed everything to protect his family, had returned to find that his wife was marrying his brother. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, his thoughts swirling as the weight of his son's words sank in. How long has this been going on? He swallowed hard. His world was falling apart, and the truth was only beginning to reveal itself. Ethan Sinclair stood at the window of his living room, his fists clenched at his sides, staring out at the world he once knew. The revelation about Lily's impending marriage to his brother Ryan hit him harder than any battlefield injury ever had. He had spent the past few weeks imagining how this moment would feel, finally coming home after months of separation, seeing his family again, reclaiming his life. But nothing had prepared him for this. His mind raced, trying to piece together how this could have happened. When, he thought, how long has this been going on? His combat training, honed over years of service, had taught him how to remain composed under extreme pressure. But the gravity of the betrayal crushed him in a way he couldn't ignore. This wasn't an enemy he could see and fight head-on. It was a betrayal that cut deeper than any wound he'd sustained in the field. Caleb stood beside him, quiet but visibly anxious. The boy, who had always been full of questions and excitement upon his father's return, was now withdrawn, his small frame tense and unsure. "Dad," Caleb said hesitantly, "are you going to stop them?" Ethan looked down at his son, his heart aching at the innocence in Caleb's eyes. The boy wasn't yet old enough to understand the full extent of the situation, but Ethan could see the confusion and hurt in his expression. Caleb didn't need to say more. Ethan knew what his son wanted, what he needed. He needed to see justice done. He needed to see his father stand up for what was right. "Yeah, buddy," Ethan said, his voice hardening. "I'm going to stop them. And you're coming with me." The taxi ride to St. Michael's Church felt like an eternity. Ethan sat rigidly, his eyes scanning the cityscape, as if he could spot something that would make this moment feel less surreal. The weight of his combat gear, despite having left the military, felt oddly comforting. His fatigues were a reminder of who he was, of the man who had fought for everything he believed in, the man who had sacrificed to protect his family. Today, though, that same uniform felt like a tool for a different kind of fight. Caleb sat quietly beside him, fiddling with the hem of his jacket, his young face drawn in confusion. "Are you angry?" he asked softly. Ethan turned to him, his eyes meeting Caleb's. "I'm not angry, Caleb. I'm just focused. This is something I have to do." He paused, running his hand through his hair. "I need you to stay calm. We don't know how things will go, but we'll do it together. All right?" Caleb nodded, still unsure but trusting his father. As they arrived at St. Michael's Church, the sound of the wedding march seeped out through the open doors, each note a reminder of the betrayal unfolding inside. Ethan's jaw tightened. Every step he took toward the church felt deliberate, This wasn't just about stopping a wedding. It was about confronting the lies that had festered in his life, about exposing the people who had taken advantage of his absence. Ethan had always treated life like a tactical operation. Every decision, every move, calculated and precise. But today was different. This wasn't about strategy, it was about confronting the truth head-on. They approached the side door of the church, where Ethan paused, his hand on the handle. He looked down at Caleb, who had lifted his chin in a way that reminded Ethan of himself. "You don't have to do this, you know," Ethan said softly. "If you want to stay outside, I can handle it alone." Caleb shook his head, his voice steady despite the uncertainty in his eyes. "I need to see this, Dad. I need to know why." Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then we'll do it together." As they entered, the grandiose church, adorned with flowers and candles, appeared almost surreal in the light of the stained glass windows. The congregation was full of faces Ethan didn't recognize. Friends, family, and neighbors who had all gathered to witness the moment that would seal his betrayal. His eyes immediately sought out Lily and Ryan. Lily stood at the altar, her back to Ethan, her bridal gown flowing like a vision of what his life could have been if he had never left. Ryan stood beside her, looking the part of the proud groom, confident, smiling, as though this was a victory. Ethan's blood ran cold. He stood still for a moment, his gaze locked on Ryan. Then, with the precision of someone who had lived in combat zones, Ethan moved through the crowd. His steps were steady, but every part of him screamed with the need to confront the truth. Caleb, hand in hand, followed him closely. As they moved toward the altar, Ethan's presence didn't go unnoticed. Heads turned, whispers followed, and the air in the church thickened with tension. His combat fatigues, still worn after his return from Afghanistan, contrasted sharply with the white suits and dresses of the guests. Lily, startled at the sight of her husband standing there in full uniform, paused mid-vow, her face a mixture of shock and guilt. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice barely audible, as if she didn't believe he was truly there. "You're making a mistake, Lily," Ethan said, his voice cutting through the silence. "A huge mistake. You're marrying my brother, a man who's been lying to me, to you, and to this whole damn congregation. You've been betraying me behind my back for months. Maybe longer." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Ethan didn't stop. "Ryan," he said, turning to his brother, whose face was flushed with a mix of fear and anger. "You think this is your victory? What? You couldn't wait for me to get back to make your move." Ryan tried to speak, but his voice faltered. "Ethan, this isn't how it looks." Before Ryan could finish, Ethan was already moving, a single calculated strike to his brother's neck, bringing him to the ground in a flash. The congregation gasped, but Ethan's focus remained locked on Lily. "Don't," she pleaded, stepping forward. "Ethan, please. This is how it looks, Lily. This is the truth." Ethan's voice was cold now, each word dripping with the depth of his betrayal. "You and Ryan have been plotting behind my back. You thought I wouldn't find out. Well, here I am." Lily took a shaky step back, her face pale. "You don't understand," she whispered. "I understand perfectly," Ethan said. "I understand that everything I've sacrificed for this family was a lie. And I'm not going to sit here and let you marry my brother like nothing happened." The wedding, once filled with promise, unraveled before the eyes of the shocked guests. Lily stood there, her face a mask of guilt and confusion, while Ryan struggled to recover from Ethan's swift blow. Caleb, standing quietly beside his father, held his breath as the truth spilled out. The chaos in the church mirrored the chaos Ethan felt within himself. But he wasn't finished. This confrontation was only the beginning of his battle to reclaim his family, his dignity, and his place in the world. Ethan turned to Caleb, his voice calm but firm. "Let's go, son. We've got work to do." Together, they left the ruins of the wedding ceremony behind, but their fight, was only just beginning. The night after the wedding, Ethan Sinclair and Caleb sat in silence in the small rental home they had moved into after Ethan's return. The house, though temporary, felt like a sanctuary after the storm of revelations at the church. Ethan paced back and forth, his mind sharp despite the emotional chaos, as he tried to digest the magnitude of what had just happened. Ryan, Lily, my own brother. The words echoed in his head like a mantra, and the weight of the betrayal hung heavily on him. Ethan's military training had prepared him for conflict, for survival, but this was different. This was a war on his life, his family, and his future. He stopped pacing and turned to Caleb, who was sitting quietly at the kitchen table, his small hands clasped tightly. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked, his voice soft despite the rage simmering beneath the surface. Caleb nodded but said nothing. His eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of confusion and an emerging understanding of the depth of the situation. He had witnessed the confrontation at the church, but now, the reality of the battle his father was preparing for was starting to sink in. "I'm fine, Dad," Caleb said finally, his voice steady for someone so young. "But what happens now?" Ethan looked at his son, his chest tightening with both pride and sadness. Caleb was growing up faster than he should have to. "I'm going to make sure they can't get away with this," Ethan said, his voice firm with resolve. "But we're not just going to go in guns blazing. I need a plan. I need evidence. I need allies." The first call Ethan made was to Sophie Elena Ramirez, a former military intelligence officer who had served with him during his deployment. Sophie had been an invaluable asset in gathering information and executing operations. Her mind was as sharp as any strategist Ethan had ever met, and she knew how to extract information and use it to devastating effect. He reached her on the first ring. "Sophie, it's Ethan. I need your help." "Always a pleasure, Sinclair," Sophie replied with a dry laugh. "What's going on?" "I need you to help me take down Ryan and Lily, my brother and wife. They've been lying, manipulating, and scheming behind my back for months, and it goes deeper than I thought. I need intel on everything. Ryan's business dealings, Lily's actions, anything that ties them together." Sophie was silent for a moment, and then her voice softened with understanding. "I'm in. Give me 24 hours. The next day, Sophie's intel flooded in. It was worse than Ethan had imagined. Ryan, it turned out, had been running a series of fraudulent business operations under the guise of legitimate ventures. Sophie uncovered falsified contracts, shady partnerships, and money laundering schemes tied to Ryan's companies. Worse, Ethan discovered that Lily had been complicit in these dealings, signing documents, orchestrating fraudulent transactions, and using Caleb as leverage to push Ethan out of the family's financial affairs. Sophie's analysis also revealed something that hit Ethan hard. Ryan had been systematically trying to alienate Caleb from him. There were notes in Lily's handwriting about reprogramming Caleb's loyalties, making sure the boy grew up believing his father was absent or unworthy. It was a calculated effort to divide and conquer, all for personal gain. With a steely resolve, Ethan sat down to organize the evidence. It was overwhelming, but it wasn't chaos. It was a map, a guide to destroying Ryan's empire and proving the depth of his betrayal. Ethan turned to Caleb, who had been sitting quietly on the couch, watching his father work. "We're going to hit them where it hurts, son," Ethan said, his voice low but filled with purpose. "Ryan's businesses, his finances, they're the key. We'll expose everything. But we do it the right way. We hit them with precision." Caleb looked up, his expression solemn but understanding. "You're going to make them pay for what they did, right?" Ethan paused for a long moment before answering, his eyes locked on his son. "They're going to pay, Caleb, and you're going to watch how it's done. You'll see how justice works, how the truth always comes out. We won't rest until everything is exposed. You have to understand, this isn't just about revenge. It's about making sure no one gets away with hurting our family like this." Ethan's military training translated seamlessly into his approach to the situation. He planned his strikes as if he were preparing for a mission. Everything had to be calculated, nothing could be left to chance. First, he would target Ryan's business empire, exposing the fraudulent contracts and financial irregularities. Sophie helped him prepare a dossier full of the most incriminating evidence. Ethan knew that once the media caught wind of it, the pressure on Ryan's companies would be relentless. But he couldn't do it alone. He reached out to a few key contacts from his time in the military and in business, leveraging his network to make sure the right people were in place to amplify his revelations. "Once the news hits, we'll have a firestorm on our hands," Ethan said to Sophie during their next call. "I want to make sure the story breaks at the right moment. We'll expose Ryan's shady deals. And once the media picks it up, it won't stop." Sophie's voice was calm but approving. "I'll handle the media channels. You focus on the legal side, and we'll make sure Ryan can't escape this." As the days passed, Ethan's plan unfolded perfectly. He launched the first strike by exposing the fraudulent contracts Ryan had signed under the guise of legitimate investments. Sophie had already planted the evidence with a few trusted journalists, and within hours, the story broke. Ryan's businesses were soon under intense scrutiny. Investigators began to dig into his finances, uncovering an intricate web of shell companies and hidden assets. With each revelation, the pressure mounted, and Ryan's once thriving empire started to crumble. Simultaneously, Ethan began preparing for the legal battles initiated by Lily and Ryan. They had already begun spreading rumors that Ethan was an unstable veteran, claiming his combat experiences had left him mentally unfit to handle his family's affairs. It was a move designed to tarnish his reputation and discredit him in front of a judge. But Ethan was ready. He gathered witnesses, legal experts, and former colleagues who could speak to his character and stability. He would show them all that Ethan Sinclair was not to be underestimated. As the weeks passed, Caleb watched his father's campaign unfold. He saw the precision in his movements, the careful calculation that went into every decision. It was a lesson in justice, how it wasn't just about emotion or revenge, but about dismantling a lie piece by piece. "I'm proud of you, Dad," Caleb said one night as they sat together, reviewing the day's progress. Ethan smiled softly at his son, the weight of the fight still heavy on his shoulders, but softened by the knowledge that Caleb was learning the importance of standing up for what was right. "You're going to learn something important from this, Caleb," Ethan said. "You don't let anyone take what's yours, and you make them pay when they try to destroy your family." As phase 1 of their campaign against Ryan's empire took off, Ethan's resolve only grew stronger. The battle was far from over, but the first strike had been a success, and there was much more to come. Ethan was prepared for what lay ahead, knowing that every revelation, every calculated move, would bring him one step closer to reclaiming what was taken from him. Ethan Sinclair's offensive against Ryan Carter's empire had entered its most dangerous phase. After the initial revelations, the pressure on Ryan had only intensified, and Ethan wasn't about to stop until the entire web of deception unraveled. Phase 1 was about precision, surgical strikes against Ryan's businesses, aimed at exposing the heart of his fraudulent activities and destabilizing the very foundation of his empire. Ethan had already targeted the most vulnerable points: financial misconduct, falsified documents, and illegal contracts. Now it was time to hit harder. With Sophie Elena Ramirez's expertise, Ethan orchestrated a series of anonymous tips to key investors, regulatory bodies, and government agencies. These tips, though seemingly minor on their own, contained just enough damning information to trigger an investigation. The results were swift. Ryan's once secure financial foothold began to crack as investors pulled out in droves. Regulatory bodies, alerted by the detailed tips, launched their own investigations into Ryan's business practices. Within days, Ryan's ventures started to collapse under the weight of the scandal. Money drained from his accounts faster than he could keep up, and the media, hungry for a new story, began to pick up the details. The media blitz was unavoidable. It didn't take long for the press to catch wind of the broader implications of Ryan's fraudulent schemes. News outlets were relentless in their coverage, with exposés revealing not only the financial misconduct but also the shocking stolen valor claims. How Ryan had falsely presented himself as a decorated veteran, using lies about his military service to bolster his business ventures. Ryan's reputation, once solid, began to crumble. Ryan Carter, stolen valor and business deception, read one headline, alongside a photograph of him in military garb, juxtaposed with a list of fraudulent claims he had made about his supposed service. Ethan watched as the media lambasted Ryan, each word a blow to his brother's ego and his carefully crafted image. But Ethan's attack didn't stop at Ryan. While Ryan's empire burned, Ethan turned his focus to his parents and his sister, Olivia Claire Mitchell. Ethan had suspected they were involved in the cover-up, and his suspicions were confirmed as he dug deeper. Financial records, personal communications, and even a few careless slip-ups by family members revealed their complicity in the betrayal. Ethan methodically compiled a dossier of their involvement, how they had aided in hiding the affair, how they had quietly supported Ryan's manipulation of Lily and Caleb. He used the media's new focus on Ryan to turn the spotlight on his family. Olivia, who had always played the role of the dutiful daughter, was now exposed for her role in shielding Ryan and Lily. She had helped manage Ryan's public image and had worked behind the scenes to suppress any dissent. Lily's teaching career, too, began to unravel. The revelation of her affair with Ryan was just the tip of the iceberg. Ethan had gathered evidence of Lily's manipulation of Caleb, the subtle ways she had alienated him from his father, convincing the boy that Ethan was absent and unworthy of his love. The media, once fixated on Ryan, now turned their attention to her. One particularly damning story was picked up by several local news outlets. Teacher under investigation for personal affairs and manipulating family members' affection. The backlash was swift and unforgiving. Parents pulled their children from Lily's school. Her colleagues distanced themselves, and the educational institution was forced to issue a statement. Lily, once respected and admired in the community, was now an outcast. The impact of the media's exposure was immediate. Public opinion shifted, and the backlash against Ryan and Lily intensified. Ethan knew the battle wasn't just legal, it was social. Ryan's reputation as a successful businessman was destroyed, and Lily's professional standing was in tatters. But Ethan wasn't done. There was still more to reveal. He leveraged every available resource, from surveillance footage to testimonies from former associates. The footage from Caleb's old school, where Lily had manipulated him to believe his father was the villain, was used as evidence in court. Ethan made sure the footage was widely circulated, amplifying the message that Lily and Ryan had orchestrated a campaign to alienate him from his own son. Caleb's voice, quiet but resolute, was also used in court. He had witnessed firsthand the manipulation of his emotions, and his testimony proved invaluable. The boy wasn't just a victim, he was an active participant in Ethan's strategy to expose the truth. Ethan's plan had one goal: to ensure that no one could ever again doubt the depth of the betrayal. He understood that the financial side of the battle was just one piece of the puzzle. Destroying Ryan's empire was necessary, but exposing the emotional manipulation was what would bring everything crashing down. And so, with every step, Ethan pushed harder. He used his military expertise to dismantle their operations systematically. He knew how to operate in stealth, how to strike where they least expected it, and how to expose every lie. His strikes were relentless, methodical, and devastating. As the dominoes began to fall, Ethan noticed a subtle change in Caleb. The boy had always been a source of strength for him, but now, Caleb was beginning to take a more active role in understanding the consequences of their actions. He sat at the kitchen table, poring over the evidence with his father, his young mind grasping the importance of justice. "Are we done yet, Dad?" Caleb asked one evening, his voice filled with a quiet determination. Ethan looked at his son, seeing the shadows of the man Caleb was becoming.
"No, son."
"Not yet, but we're getting close." Caleb nodded, understanding the weight of his father's words. There was no easy way out of this. But the fight, Ethan knew, would lead to a reckoning that would force Ryan, Lily, and everyone who had betrayed him to face the truth. The battle was far from over, but the first phase of Ethan's plan had shaken the foundation of his enemy's carefully constructed lies. With each revelation, the truth was becoming undeniable, and those who had conspired against him were beginning to realize the full scope of their mistakes. Phase 1 was complete, but the war for Ethan's family was just beginning. The weight of Ethan Sinclair's pursuit of justice didn't lighten after his initial victories. Phase 1 had shaken Ryan and Lily to their cores, But Ethan knew the fight was far from over. The next steps would be more tactical, more methodical, targeting their remaining bastions of power, their legal standing and public image. Ethan's first move in Phase 2 came swiftly after the media frenzy died down. Lily filed for divorce, and not just any divorce. She sought full custody of Caleb, playing the card of an unstable war veteran to paint Ethan as unfit to be a father. She had anticipated that Ethan would retaliate, but she couldn't have predicted the depth of his resolve. As the divorce papers were served, Ethan's first instinct was to remain calm. He knew Lily and Ryan would play dirty, but Ethan's response would be just as calculated. He didn't need to stoop to their level. He had evidence, hard, irrefutable evidence, that would not only expose their lies but ultimately ensure his victory. Ethan contacted Sophie Ramirez again, who had been instrumental in gathering evidence against Ryan's financial empire. Now, Sophie's expertise in uncovering the deeper layers of deception would prove invaluable. Over the next few days, she worked tirelessly to uncover further incriminating details about Ryan and Lily's actions. Sophie presented Ethan with bank statements showing large, unexplained transfers between Lily's account and Ryan's businesses. Property transactions made under false names were traced to shell companies linked directly to Ryan. Communication logs revealed discussions about alienating Caleb from Ethan, carefully orchestrated over months, even years. Each piece of evidence Sophie uncovered strengthened Ethan's position, making it clear to him that Lily and Ryan's betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated campaign to destroy his family. The custody hearing was the next battlefield. Ethan's legal team, armed with a mountain of evidence, was ready for the fight. His legal counsel countered Lily's accusations with an ironclad argument. They presented testimonies from military officers who had served with Ethan, all vouching for his mental and emotional stability. Psychologists and child development experts also weighed in, highlighting the harmful effects of Lily and Ryan's alienation efforts on Caleb's well-being. Ethan's calm demeanor throughout the proceedings spoke volumes. His focus was on Caleb, on making sure his son knew that no matter the chaos around them, Ethan would always be his father. He wasn't just fighting for custody. He was fighting for Caleb's future. Then came Caleb's testimony. The moment Caleb took the stand, the room went silent. He was a young boy, only 8, but he was wise beyond his years. Caleb spoke clearly, his voice steady as he described the love and care his father had shown him. He recounted the time spent with Ethan before his deployment and how the last months had been filled with confusion and sadness, watching his mother and uncle manipulate him. Caleb's words pierced through the false narrative Lily and Ryan had tried to weave. His testimony dismantled their claims that Ethan was unfit for fatherhood, revealing the truth of their emotional manipulation. The room was visibly moved. "I just want to be with Dad," Caleb said quietly, his small voice echoing across the courtroom. "He never lied to me. He never made me feel scared." It was a moment of clarity, a stark contrast to the carefully constructed lies that had been spread about Ethan's character. The ruling came swiftly. The judge, after hearing the overwhelming testimonies and seeing the undeniable evidence, granted Ethan primary custody of Caleb. The relief that washed over Ethan was immense, but he remained focused. This was just one battle won. The victory reaffirmed his rightful place as Caleb's father and exposed the full extent of Lily and Ryan's betrayal to the community. As the custody battle concluded, Ethan shifted his focus to Phase 3 of his campaign. The legal victory was crucial, but it was only the beginning. Now, Ethan would take aim at the remnants of Ryan's fraudulent activities and Lily's social standing. There could be no redemption for them, not after what they had done. Sophie's efforts had already crippled Ryan's business empire, but Ethan knew that the final blow had yet to fall. Ryan's fraudulent contracts and illegal dealings were a tangled web, and Ethan would expose every strand of it. He leveraged his legal team and contacts to ensure that Ryan's remaining assets were seized, that every fraudulent deal was investigated, and that Ryan's businesses would collapse under the weight of their own corruption. Simultaneously, Ethan began a quiet campaign to dismantle Lily's social standing. She had once been a respected figure in the community, a beloved teacher and mother, but now she was a symbol of betrayal and manipulation. Ethan made sure the media knew about her role in Caleb's alienation, the way she had played a part in dividing their family for her own gain. Local social media and community outlets picked up the story, and soon, Lily's professional reputation followed the same path as Ryan's. Public disgrace. Ethan knew that the consequences of their actions couldn't be undone, but they could be exposed. And as each piece of the puzzle fell into place, Ethan felt the weight of his mission. He wasn't just fighting for retribution. He was fighting for the future. A future where Caleb could grow up without the shadow of deceit hanging over him. His meticulous planning, relentless pursuit of justice, and unwavering commitment to his son had brought him to this point. The betrayers had been unmasked, and now they would face the consequences of their lies. The campaign wasn't over. There was more to expose, more to uncover. But as Ethan stood in the quiet of his rental house, his eyes briefly catching Caleb's as the boy played quietly in the corner, he knew that they had won a crucial victory. For the first time since his return, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. The fight was far from finished, but they had taken the first steps toward rebuilding their lives. Phase 3 had begun, and the stakes had never been higher. Ethan Sinclair stood at the helm of his strategic campaign, fully aware that the final blows needed to be precise and devastating. The groundwork had been laid over the last few weeks, but now, every step was calculated, every move meticulously planned to ensure Ryan and Lily could not recover from the destruction they had caused. Sophie Ramirez, ever the brilliant strategist, had been instrumental in the intel-gathering process. She and Ethan now focused all their efforts on dismantling what remained of Ryan's empire, using his fraudulent contracts, offshore account transactions, and criminal connections to suffocate him. The first of these strikes hit Ryan's remaining business operations. Ethan had unearthed multiple ongoing fraudulent contracts tied to Ryan's companies. These contracts, many of which had been signed under false pretenses, were now exposed for what they were: worthless paper meant to pad Ryan's pockets. Sophie's team had also traced transactions to offshore accounts, where Ryan had hidden millions in illicit funds. These accounts were connected to dubious business contacts who had acted as facilitators for the fraud. The revelations triggered a cascade of events. Federal investigators, who had been watching Ryan's empire unravel, were now armed with undeniable evidence. The FBI launched full-scale investigations into Ryan's business dealings. His fraudulent contracts became the smoking gun, and the agencies involved moved swiftly to freeze his assets. Ryan's empire, what little was left of it, began to crumble. His businesses were seized, his assets liquidated, and criminal charges were prepared. Ethan had ensured that the end of Ryan's business was as complete as his moral collapse. As Ryan's empire disintegrated, Lily's professional reputation suffered the same fate. The evidence Ethan and Sophie had gathered painted a damning picture of Lily's manipulation, deceit, and complicity in Ryan's actions. The media caught wind of her role in the emotional manipulation of Caleb, as well as her attempt to sabotage Ethan's reputation. Lily had tried to present herself as a victim, but the evidence didn't lie. Emails, recordings, and testimony from Caleb, once manipulated into siding with his mother and uncle, confirmed the extent of her betrayal. The public outrage was swift, and Lily was ostracized both professionally and socially. Her career as a teacher, which had once been revered, was destroyed. The school district launched an internal investigation, ultimately terminating her position. Her colleagues and friends abandoned her, unable to reconcile the person she had become with the one they had trusted. For Lily, there was no turning back. Sophie, always the mastermind behind the scenes, orchestrated a media blitz that would ensure Ryan and Lily's betrayals were broadcasted for the world to see. Sophie collaborated with journalist Natalie Grace Turner, a well-known investigative reporter with a reputation for exposing high-profile scandals. Together, they put together a comprehensive exposé that detailed the full extent of the financial crimes and emotional manipulation orchestrated by Ryan and Lily. The article was nothing short of explosive. It included detailed accounts of Ryan's fraudulent business practices, Lily's manipulation of Ethan and Caleb, and their collective effort to alienate Ethan from his son. The piece also highlighted the personal betrayal within Ethan's family, revealing how Ethan's parents and his sister, Olivia Claire Mitchell, had been complicit in helping to cover up Ryan and Lily's actions. The timing of the article was perfect, right when Ryan's empire was under investigation and Lily's reputation was in tatters. The exposé went viral, dominating national news cycles. Public opinion turned swiftly against Ryan and Lily, galvanizing a wave of support for Ethan. People were outraged at how far the betrayal had gone, how deeply their manipulation had wounded an entire family. As the fallout from the exposé spread, Ethan's parents and sister Olivia Claire Mitchell found themselves under the spotlight. Sophie's intelligence work had already connected the dots, revealing how Ethan's family had worked behind the scenes to shield Ryan and Lily, all while knowing full well the harm being done. Olivia, once the picture of a loyal daughter, was exposed for her complicity in covering up the affair and her role in discrediting Ethan. The consequences were swift. Ethan's parents, shocked by the revelations and the damage to their name, faced public humiliation. His father's long-standing business relationships began to erode as his name was tainted by his association with Ryan. Olivia, who had once held a respected position in the local community, now found herself isolated. Professional losses followed personal ones, as she lost her job at a prestigious law firm, and former friends distanced themselves. Ethan hadn't planned for this. He had hoped his family would stand with him in the face of betrayal, but now, it seemed, they would bear the consequences of their actions. His parents and Olivia were left to deal with the fallout from their own choices, and Ethan found himself with only Caleb by his side. With every strike, Ethan ensured there was no escape for Ryan and Lily. He had left no stone unturned, no lie left standing. The culmination of his efforts, the legal documents, surveillance footage, testimonies, media exposure, had left them with no avenues for recovery. There was no redemption for Ryan, no way back for Lily. Their lives, once filled with privilege and power, had been dismantled piece by piece. Ethan's meticulous planning, his patience, and his unwavering resolve had ensured that betrayal had consequences. His campaign was not just about revenge, it was about restoring balance, about making sure that those who chose deceit and manipulation were held accountable. The people who had tried to ruin his life were now facing the full weight of their actions. The final blows had been struck. Ethan sat in his small office, the weight of the campaign's success settling on him. The public exposure, the legal victories, the irreversible collapse of Ryan and Lily's lives. It was all part of a meticulous strategy. Caleb entered the room quietly, his eyes filled with understanding. Ethan looked at his son, who had stood by him through the worst of it, and he knew the fight had been worth it. "We did it, Dad," Caleb said, his voice steady. Ethan smiled softly, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "Yeah, we did. But this isn't over. Not yet. There's always more to do." They weren't finished yet. There was a new chapter ahead, one where Ethan and Caleb would continue to rebuild their lives and make sure no one else could take advantage of their family again. The final strike had been delivered, but the war had shaped them both. They were ready for whatever came next. 5 years had passed since Ethan Sinclair's world had been shattered by betrayal. The destruction of Ryan and Lily's lives, once the focal point of his existence, had become a distant memory, one that no longer defined him. Instead, he had built something entirely new from the ashes of the past, a life where justice wasn't just a goal, it was a legacy. Ethan sat at the head of a polished conference table, surrounded by fellow veterans who had joined his new security consulting firm, Wolf Security. The room buzzed with energy as the team strategized over their next client. But it wasn't just about business anymore. Wolf Security had become a symbol of Ethan's commitment to justice, of loyalty, honor, and consequence. "What we do here," Ethan said to the team, his voice steady and authoritative, "isn't just about protection. It's about ensuring people understand the cost of betrayal, whether in business or in life. We don't just manage security, we manage consequences." The team nodded, their eyes reflecting the same dedication and discipline Ethan had taught them. Each member of Wolf Security had come from different backgrounds, but they shared a deep commitment to the principles that Ethan had instilled in them. The importance of loyalty, the unyielding demand for accountability, and the understanding that justice had to be served. Sophie Ramirez, the mastermind behind many of the firm's strategies, had stood by Ethan since the beginning. Together, they transformed their passion for justice into a legitimate business, employing fellow veterans who shared their ethos. Wolf Security specialized not only in corporate security but in consequence management, ensuring that companies and individuals were held accountable for their actions, especially when they tried to manipulate or deceive others. Sophie was the heart of the operation, coordinating the firm's efforts with military precision. She worked closely with Ethan, their bond having deepened through their shared mission. "We're not just changing the game, Ethan," Sophie remarked one evening. "We're redefining how people see loyalty and justice in the real world, and we're doing it the right way." Ethan smiled. "It's about time the world understood that loyalty doesn't come with a price tag. It's priceless." At home, Ethan and Caleb's relationship had transformed into something unbreakable. Caleb, now 13, had matured into a confident young man, embodying the principles of honor and strength that Ethan had taught him. The boy who had once witnessed the unraveling of his family now stood beside his father, stronger and more determined than ever. Ethan had made sure Caleb knew the weight of the lessons learned through hardship. Trust was sacred, and the truth would always win. They spent hours talking, whether over a quiet dinner or late into the night, discussing life, morality, and the responsibilities of leadership. Caleb wasn't just his son. He was Ethan's equal in many ways, someone who understood the value of justice and the importance of standing up for what was right. As their lives began to stabilize, Ethan took the next step in his journey, sharing his story with the world. With the help of journalist Natalie Grace Turner, Ethan began working on a book and a documentary series that would tell his story, the story of how a man who had lost everything could rise again, methodically, strategically, and relentlessly to reclaim his life. The book, The Wolf's War, outlined Ethan's approach to justice, a calculated campaign that wasn't born of anger or vengeance, but of the need for accountability. The series that followed would go deeper, revealing the complexities of betrayal, loyalty, and the importance of seeing things through to the end. Natalie Grace Turner, who had been a key part of the media blitz during Ethan's battle against Ryan and Lily, helped shape the narrative. "This isn't just your story, Ethan," she said during their first meeting. "It's a message to everyone who's been wronged, who's felt betrayed. Your story is about redemption, not just for you, but for anyone who's ever been hurt by deception." Ethan nodded. "It's about showing people that the truth always wins. That betrayal doesn't have to define you. It's just the beginning of your fight for justice." The book and documentary, when they were finally released, garnered widespread acclaim. The story of Ethan Sinclair's battle against those who betrayed him resonated with people from all walks of life. It wasn't just a cautionary tale, it was an inspiration. As the media picked up on the story, Ethan became a respected figure in both military and civilian circles. His work with Wolf Security not only earned the company a reputation as a leader in corporate security, but also as a firm dedicated to ensuring that those who harmed others would face the consequences. Ethan's story became a symbol of resilience, the ultimate tale of a man who had been betrayed, but had used that pain to shape a better future. Ryan and Lily, however, never recovered from the exposure of their deceit. Legal challenges continued to mount, and the financial ruin that had followed them was irreversible. The public's disdain for their actions was unforgiving, and the legal proceedings that dragged on ensured their isolation. They were left with nothing but the consequences of their lies, their lives reduced to a cautionary tale about the price of betrayal. Ethan's parents and sister Olivia Claire Mitchell were no better off. The fallout from their involvement in the conspiracy was widespread, and the personal and professional losses they faced were severe. Olivia, once a figure of trust within the community, found herself ostracized. Ethan's parents, unable to distance themselves from their complicity, suffered irreparable damage to their reputations. The ripple effect of betrayal, Ethan realized, had no boundaries. It reached everyone involved, regardless of their role. 5 years later, Ethan stood outside the headquarters of Wolf Security, looking up at the sleek building that symbolized everything he had fought for. He had built a new life, a life where the foundation of trust, loyalty, and justice was unshakable. And beside him stood Caleb, No longer the boy who had witnessed his family's collapse, but a young man ready to carry the torch forward. "I've never been prouder of you," Ethan said, placing a hand on Caleb's shoulder. Caleb smiled, his eyes filled with quiet confidence. "We did this together, Dad." Ethan nodded, his heart swelling with pride. They had faced the darkest of times, but together, they had come through it. "We're not done yet," Ethan said, looking ahead. "There's always more to do, always more to protect." And as they walked into the future, side by side, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it with the same unyielding resolve and commitment to justice that had defined their lives. This was their new beginning, and the fight for truth and retribution, no matter the cost, would continue.